Dear listener, welcome to another enthralling tale from the Hercule Poirot Story Podcast, where the little grey cells unravel the most perplexing enigmas of human folly. Tonight, we journey to the shadowed corridors of Willowbrook Hall, a venerable estate nestled in the verdant hills of rural Sussex, England. During the opulent yet turbulent decade of the 1920s, here, amidst the fog-shrouded oaks and the relentless drizzle that cloaks the landscape in melancholy, a sinister drama unfolds. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and impending doom, as secrets long buried rise like spectres from the grave. Chapter 1. The Arrival at Willowbrook Hall. In the autumn of 1927, under a sky heavy with the melancholy of an English September, the venerable estate of Willowbrook Hall stood resolute, a monument to aristocratic endurance amidst the verdant hills of rural Sussex. Its ancient stone walls, cloaked in ivy that clung like whispered secrets, bore the weight of centuries, each brick etched with the triumphs and tragedies of the Harrington family. The estate sprawled across acres of meticulously manicured gardens, their roses now drooping under the persistent drizzle, while beyond, a dense woodland of gnarled oaks and willows shrouded the grounds in an air of enigmatic seclusion. It was to this bastion of heritage, where the past seemed to linger in every shadowed corner, that Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective of unparalleled renown, was summoned by a telegram marked with urgency. Poirot, a figure of fastidious elegance, stood upon the platform of the village station, his egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat. His waxed moustache, a masterpiece of symmetry, twitched faintly in the damp breeze, and his piercing green eyes surveyed the scene with the precision of a jeweler appraising a gem. Clad in a tailored overcoat, his diminutive stature belied the formidable intellect housed within what he fondly termed his little grey cells. Beside him stood Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and confidant, a tall and broad-shouldered Englishman whose fair hair and ruddy complexion spoke of a life tempered by military discipline. Hastings, ever the practical foil to Poirot's cerebral brilliance, carried their valises with a soldier's stoic efficiency.
A family gathering. Foul play is suspected, though no body has been found. It's a grim business, I fear. The path to the hall was a serpentine ribbon of gravel, flanked by ancient yews that stood like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, and a fine rain misted their faces, lending an ethereal quality to the landscape. Above, the sky was a tapestry of grey, the clouds swollen with the promise of a tempest. As they approached, the hall loomed into view, its Gothic arches and towering chimneys cutting a stark silhouette against the overcast heavens. The windows, like watchful eyes, glinted faintly, reflecting the flicker of gaslight within. The scene was one of brooding majesty, as if the house itself harbored secrets it was loath to divulge. The great oak doors of Willowbrook Hall creaked open, revealing Lady Amelia Harrington, the matriarch of the estate. A woman in her mid-50s, she possessed a regal poise that spoke of generations of privilege. Her silver-streaked hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her sharp, aristocratic features were softened only slightly by the lines of grief that etched her countenance. Her eyes, a steely grey, betrayed a psychology of iron-willed determination, yet beneath lay a current of sorrow, as though the weight of the family's legacy pressed heavily upon her. Her attire, a morning gown of deep sapphire, was impeccable, though the slight tremor in her hands suggested a turmoil she strove to conceal. Her motive, if any, remained opaque, but Poirot noted the fierce protectiveness in her posture, a mother guarding her domain, perhaps at any cost. "Monsieur Poirot," she intoned, her voice steady despite the pallor of her complexion, "your reputation as a solver of mysteries precedes you. I am grateful for your swift response. My son, Edward, the heir to Willowbrook, has vanished. We fear the worst, and I implore you to uncover the truth." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of courteous deference. "Madame, the little grey firelight cast elongated shadows, dancing across the faces of the assembled household, each of whom bore the weight of suspicion in their own way. Poirot's keen gaze swept over them, cataloguing their features and demeanours with the precision of a scientist. First among them was Uncle Bertram Harrington, a corpulent man in his early 60s, whose ruddy cheeks and bushy moustache gave him the appearance of a jovial squire, yet his small darting eyes, like those of a cornered fox, suggested a psychology of desperation. A known spendthrift, Bertram's profligate habits had plunged him into debt, his speculations in foreign ventures having collapsed spectacularly. His motive was clear. The inheritance of Willowbrook could erase his financial ruin, but his nervous fidgeting hinted at deeper secrets. Beside him stood Miss Eliza Thornton, Edward's fiancée, a woman of 28 whose beauty was both striking and haunting. Her raven hair framed a porcelain complexion, and her deep blue eyes shimmered with unshed tears, veiling a turmoil that Poirot sensed at once. Her psychology was one of passion restrained, a woman capable of great love, but also of fierce resentment. Rumours of a recent quarrel with Edward suggested a motive of revenge, perhaps born of betrayal. Her delicate hands clutched a handkerchief, the gesture betraying her agitation. Next was cousin Victoria Langley, a spinster of 40, whose severe tweeds and wire-rimmed spectacles lent her an air of austere authority. Her thin lips were pursed in perpetual disapproval, and her sharp gaze missed nothing. Psychologically, she was a study in calculated ambition, viewing herself as the rightful steward of Willowbrook due to her meticulous management of its accounts. Her motive was rooted in a contested claim to the estate, believing Edward's reckless plans threatened its legacy. Her composure was a facade, Poirot noted, masking an envy that simmered beneath the surface. The loyal butler, Mr. Jenkins, hovered at the periphery, a gaunt figure of 55 with hollow cheeks and greying hair. His impassive demeanour was that of a man long accustomed to servitude, yet his eyes betrayed a flicker of resentment. His psychology, retiring to his chambers after a family dinner 2 nights ago. There was no note, no sign of a struggle. Yet he is gone. The household is distraught, and I fear some malevolent hand is at work. Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. "Mes amis," he addressed the assembly, his voice calm yet commanding. "A disappearance is but a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot is no stranger to puzzles. Edward Harrington, adventurer and heir, has vanished. Yet the truth lies hidden in the details. The fabric of a gown, the tread of a boot, the glance that betrays the heart. We shall uncover it." Hastings, ever observant, leaned closer. "What's your first step, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "To listen, mon ami. The truth speaks in whispers, and the little grey cells, they are attentive." As the fire crackled and the rain drummed against the windows, the stage was set for a mystery that would test even Poirot's formidable intellect. The shadows of Willowbrook Hall seemed to deepen, as if the house itself anticipated the revelations to come. Chapter 2. The Suspects Assemble. The drawing-room of Willowbrook Hall, bathed in the flickering glow of a grand fireplace, was a cavernous chamber steeped in the weight of ancestral gravitas. Heavy velvet draperies, the color of claret, framed tall windows that admitted only slivers of the dreary Sussex twilight, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the polished mahogany paneling. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint musk of aged leather, the room's opulence underscored by a brooding tension that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Ancestral portraits of stern-visaged Harringtons gazed down upon the assembled company, their painted eyes seeming to judge the living with silent reproach. It was here, in this theatre of suspicion, that Hercule Poirot,
The diminutive Belgian detective with his meticulously waxed mustache and piercing green eyes began his investigation into the mysterious vanishing of Edward Harrington, heir to Willowbrook Hall. Beside him stood Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal confidant, whose upright
aristocratic features. Her silver-streaked hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her sapphire gown lent her an air of mournful dignity. Her psychology, Poirot noted, was one of iron-willed resolve, tempered by a mother's anguish for her missing son. Her protectiveness over Willowbrook suggested a motive that, while not immediately apparent, could not be dismissed, perhaps a desperate act to preserve the estate's legacy. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Harrington began, her voice resonant yet tinged with strain. "We are a family besieged by uncertainty. Edward, my son, was last seen retiring to his chambers after a dinner marked by discord. I implore you to unravel this mystery, for I cannot bear the thought that some calamity has befallen him." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of courteous determination. "Madame, the disappearance of your son is a puzzle most intricate, but rest assured, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are equal to the task. Let us meet the household, for it is in their words and deeds that the truth shall be revealed." The first to draw Poirot's attention was Uncle Bertram Harrington, a corpulent gentleman in his early 60s, whose ruddy cheeks and bushy moustache gave him the appearance of a jovial country squire. Yet his small, darting eyes betrayed a psychology of desperation, like a fox ensnared by its own folly. Bertram's profligate habits were well known. His speculations in foreign ventures had left him mired in debt, a fact that hung about him like a miasma. His motive was clear. The inheritance of Willowbrook could erase his financial ruin. As he adjusted his ill-fitting waistcoat, his fingers trembled slightly, a telltale sign of unease that Poirot catalogued with interest. "Uncle Bertram," Poirot addressed him, his tone measured. "You were present at the dinner 2 nights ago. What transpired?" Bertram cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "A family spat, nothing more. Edward was prattling about selling off land madness, if you ask me. I told him so and left early. Retired to my room by eyes darting to the floor. We disagreed. Edward's plans to sell the estate hurt me deeply. I loved him, but he was reckless. I retired early, distraught." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Distraught, mademoiselle? Or perhaps betrayed? The heart, it speaks loudly in such matters. Cousin Victoria Langley, a spinster of 40, stood with a rigidity that suggested both discipline and disdain. Her severe tweeds and wire-rimmed spectacles lent her an air of austere authority, and her thin lips were pursed in perpetual disapproval. Psychologically, she was a study in calculated ambition, viewing herself as the rightful steward of Willowbrook due to her meticulous oversight of its finances. Her motive was rooted in a contested claim to the estate, believing Edward's cavalier attitude threatened its legacy. Her sharp gaze met Poirot's with defiance, though a faint tremor in her hands suggested a crack in her composure. "Miss Langley," Poirot inquired, "you disapproved of Edward's plans. How vehemently, may I ask?" Victoria's voice was clipped. "He was unfit to inherit. Willowbrook deserves a steward, not a spendthrift. I voiced my concerns, but he dismissed me. I was in my study by 11, working." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A woman of precision, yet passion lurks beneath. Interesting, non?" The butler, Mr. Jenkins, hovered at the room's edge, a gaunt figure of 55 with hollow cheeks and graying hair. His impassive demeanor was that of a man long accustomed to servitude, yet his eyes held a flicker of resentment, like embers buried beneath ash. His psychology suggested a lifetime of suppressed grievances, possibly stemming from a slight by the Harrington family years prior. His motive might be retribution, though his loyalty to Lady Harrington complicated the picture. His hands, clasped tightly, betrayed a tension that Poirot noted with interest. "Mr. Jenkins," Poirot said, his tone gentle yet probing. "You served the dinner. What did you observe?" Jenkins' voice was low, measured. "The family was tense, sir. Arguments over the estate's future. I cleared the table by 10:30 and saw to my duties. I know no state that evening." Thorne's voice was calm, almost too measured. "He was agitated, Monsieur Poirot. The dinner was contentious. I retired to the library by 11, reading. I saw nothing untoward." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The physician observes the body, but the mind? That too you observe, no?" As the firelight cast shifting shadows, Poirot stepped forward, addressing the assembly. "Mes amis, a disappearance most puzzling. Edward Harrington, adventurer and heir, was last seen retiring to his chambers after a dinner marked by discord. No note, no struggle evident. Yet the method of his presumed demise remains elusive. The truth lies in the details, the glance that betrays, the word unspoken. We shall uncover it." Hastings leaned closer, his voice low. "A curious lot, Poirot. Each has a reason to wish Edward gone." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Indeed, mon ami. The motives, they entwine like the ivy on these walls. Greed, revenge, ambition. But the little grey cells, they will disentangle this web." The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the distant patter of rain against the windows. The suspects exchanged glances, some wary, others defiant, as the weight of Poirot's scrutiny settled upon them. The mystery of Willowbrook Hall had begun to unfold, and the detective's methodical mind was already piecing together the fragments of a truth that lay hidden in the shadows. Chapter 3. The Initial Inquiry. The library of Willowbrook Hall, with its towering shelves of leather-bound tomes and the faint aroma of aged paper mingling with the lingering trace of tobacco smoke, provided a fitting arena for Hercule Poirot's initial inquiries into the disappearance of Edward Harrington. The room, bathed in the soft glow of gas lamps, was a sanctuary of knowledge, its dark oak paneling absorbing the light and casting an intimate, almost conspiratorial atmosphere. A heavy mahogany table dominated the center, its surface cluttered with papers and a silver inkstand, while a fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of suspicion that permeated morning following their arrival, October 1927, and the mystery of Edward Harrington's vanishing demanded immediate attention. Poirot had requested private interviews with each member of the household, and the library, with its air of solemnity, was the chosen venue. Lady Amelia Harrington, the matriarch, was the first to be summoned. She entered with the grace of her station, her sapphire gown rustling softly, her silver-streaked hair immaculately coiffed. Yet her steely grey eyes, though resolute, betrayed a flicker of anguish, a mother's heart wrestling with the uncertainty of her son's fate. Poirot noted her psychology, a woman of iron resolve, her devotion to Willowbrook's legacy bordering on obsession. Yet her grief seemed genuine, if tempered by a curious restraint. "Madame," Poirot began, his Belgian accent crisp and deliberate, "recount, if you please, the events of the evening Edward vanished. The dinner, the mood, the words exchanged." Lady Harrington seated herself, her posture erect. "The dinner was a family affair, Monsieur Poirot, though marked by discord. Edward, my son, announced his intention to sell portions of the estate to fund his next expedition to Africa. It was poorly received. Uncle Bertram stormed off in a huff, declaring it madness. Eliza, his fiancée, wept bitterly. and Victoria argued fiercely about the estate's future. I remained until 10, then retired to my boudoir, alone. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Alone, madame? At what hour precisely? By 10:30, she replied, her voice steady, but her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. I heard no disturbances thereafter. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. And Edward? He retired when? Shortly after 11, to my knowledge. He was last seen ascending the staircase to his chambers. A red herring surfaced almost immediately, discovered by Hastings during a preliminary inspection of Edward's room, a torn scrap of fabric caught on the window latch, its delicate weave matching the hem of Eliza Thornton's emerald gown. Yet, when Poirot questioned Eliza, her alibi appeared ironclad. She had been...
Psychology, Poirot observed, was one of desperation. His debts, a noose, tightening around his neck. Monsieur Bertram, Poirot said, you left the dinner early. Where did you go? Bertram mopped his brow with a handkerchief. To my room, as I said. I was indisposed. Too much claret, perhaps. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Your eyes, they evade. A man in debt. He might see opportunity in an heir's absence, no? Bertram bristled. I'm no murderer, if that's what you imply. Not murder, perhaps, Poirot mused. But disappearance? We shall explore. Cousin Victoria Langley entered next, her severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze lending her an air of unyielding authority. Her psychology was one of calculated ambition, her belief in her own superiority as Willowbrook's steward evident in her pursed lips and steady hands. Yet, under Poirot's probing, her composure cracked, revealing a simmering envy of Edward's birthright. Miss Langley, Poirot inquired, you argued with Edward. His plans threatened your vision for the estate, did they not? Victoria's voice was sharp. He was reckless, Monsieur Poirot. Willowbrook is a legacy, not a plaything. I told him so, but he dismissed me. I was in my study by 11, reviewing accounts. Poirot tilted his head. Accounts, mademoiselle? Or perhaps plans to secure your claim? Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her silence a clue in itself. Mr. Jenkins, the butler, followed, his gaunt frame and hollow cheeks giving him the appearance of a man worn by years of servitude. His impassive demeanor masked a resentment that Poirot sensed immediately, a psychology shaped by suppressed grievances. Mr. Jenkins, Poirot said, you observed the dinner. What tensions did you note? Jenkins' voice was low, measured. The family was at odds, sir. Master Edward's plan to sell land caused a stir. I cleared the table by 10:30 and saw to my duties in the pantry. I heard nothing unusual. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet your hands, they clasp tightly. A loyal servant, perhaps, but one with secrets? Jenkins' gaze flickered, but mind a whirl of deductions. Hastings, he murmured. Observe the inconsistencies. The clock in the hall was stopped at 11, deliberate, perhaps, a device to obscure the timeline. And the fabric in Edward's room planted, I suspect, to mislead. Hastings looked up from his notes. But who, Poirot? They all have motives. Bertram's debts, Eliza's quarrel, Victoria's ambition, Jenkins's resentment, Thorne's secrets. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisely, mon ami. The motives, they entwine like the roots of these ancient oaks, but the little grey cells, they discern patterns. Bertram's evasion, Victoria's envy, Jenkins's tension. These are psychological clues. The fabric, the clock, these are physical misdirections. We must dig deeper. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the library windows like a summons to the truth. Poirot paused, his gaze distant. The evening of the dinner. At 10, it ends in discord. At 11, Edward retires. Yet the maid reported footsteps at 1 in the morning. Whose? And why the stopped clock?
The truth, it hides in these discrepancies. Hastings frowned. It's a devilish puzzle, Poirot. Could it be a stranger? An intruder? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The heart of this mystery beats within Willowbrook. The family, the servants, they guard secrets like treasures. We shall unearth them. As the fire cast flickering shadows across the library, the weight of the investigation settled upon Poirot. The disappearance of Edward Harrington was no mere accident. It was a carefully woven tapestry of deceit, and Poirot's little grey cells were already threading the needle to unravel it. Chapter 4. Footprints in the Mist. The dawn broke over Willowbrook Hall with a shroud of fog that clung to the Sussex landscape like a spectral veil, rendering the sprawling estate an ethereal realm of half-seen shapes and muffled sounds. The ancient oaks and willows, their branches drooping under the weight of persistent drizzle, stood as silent witnesses to the mystery.
The English countryside. It conceals its truths beneath a cloak of mist. But the little grey cells, they see through such obfuscations. We seek the traces of the vanished heir footprints, perhaps, or some mislaid object that speaks of guilt.
Hastings nodded, his breath visible in the cold air. The grounds are vast, Poirot. If Edward was taken from his room, there must be some sign, a trail, a clue. But this fog makes it devilishly hard to see. The pair began their inspection at the base of Edward's chamber window, a tall mullioned affair on the second floor of the hall, its stone sill slick with rain. The window overlooked a gravel path that wound through the gardens toward a dense willow grove, its branches trailing like mournful fingers into a nearby stream. Poirot's keen gaze fell upon a series of muddy footprints embedded in the soft earth beneath the window, partially obscured by the night's rain, but still discernible. The prints were large, unmistakably masculine, and led in a wavering line toward the grove. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the impressions as he studied their depth and shape. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, his voice low with intensity. "These footprints, they are not those of Edward. His boots, as we observed in his wardrobe, are of a smaller size. These belong to another man of considerable weight, perhaps. Yet the rain has blurred the edges. A deliberate act of nature or man?" Hastings frowned, peering at the prints. Could they be the killers? Or perhaps someone who followed Edward? Poirot's mustache twitched. A killer? A follower? Or a distraction? The little grey cells, they ponder all possibilities. Let us follow the trail. The footprints led them to the willow grove, where the fog thickened, enveloping the gnarled trees in a ghostly embrace. The ground here was softer, the prints deeper, suggesting a hurried pace. At the base of a particularly ancient willow, Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint of metal half buried in the mud. A silver cigarette case, its surface engraved with the initials E.T.
He noted, toyed nervously with his pocket watch, betraying an anxiety that belied his calm exterior. "Dr. Thorne," Poirot began, holding up the cigarette case, "this was found in the willow grove, near footprints leading from Edward's window. It bears your initials. Explain, if you please." Thorne's eyes flickered, but his voice remained steady. "It was stolen, Monsieur Poirot. I noticed it missing 2 days ago, before the dinner. Someone must have placed it there to implicate me." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Stolen, you say? And yet you did not report it. Curious for a man of your precision. Tell me, what was your connection to Edward in Africa?" Thorne hesitated, his fingers tightening on the watch. "We met briefly during his expedition. I provided medical aid after an injury, nothing more." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Nothing more? Yet your eyes betray unease. The little grey cells, they note such things." As Thorne departed, Poirot confided in Hastings. "His anxiety, it speaks of secrets. Perhaps an addiction, morphine, common among physicians, or a deeper grudge. We shall investigate. The inquiry continued with Mr. Jenkins, the butler, whose gaunt frame and hollow cheeks seemed to carry the weight of decades of servitude. Poirot questioned him in the pantry, where the scent of polished silver and linseed oil hung heavy. Jenkins's psychology, Poirot observed, was one of suppressed resentment, his loyalty to Lady Harrington tempered by a bitterness that flickered in his eyes. "Mr. Jenkins," Poirot said, his tone gentle yet probing, "you served Edward for years. Did he ever wrong you?" Jenkins's hands paused in polishing a tray, his voice low. "Master Edward accused me of pilfering from the household funds. A lie, sir. He threatened to dismiss me. I bore him no ill will, but it stung." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A motive, perhaps? Retribution for a wounded pride?" Jenkins shook his head vehemently. "I'd never harm him, sir. My duty is to the family." Poirot nodded, but his mind was already turning. "A loyal servant, yet the heart nurses its wounds." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Eliza's passion, Victoria's ambition. They too are threads in this web. The fabric in Edward's room, it points to Eliza, yet her alibi holds. Victoria's composure, it cracks under scrutiny. We must probe further." Phoo. The morning waned, and the fog began to lift, revealing the stark beauty of Willowbrook's grounds. Poirot stood at the library window, gazing out at the willow grove. The method of Edward's vanishing, it eludes us. Was he taken from his room? Or did he leave willingly? The footprints suggest flight or pursuit. But the cigarette case, it screams of manipulation. Hastings looked up. "What's our next step, Poirot?" Poirot turned, his expression resolute. "We return to the household, mon ami. The human mind, it betrays through patterns, glances, hesitations, lies. Revenge simmers like a forgotten kettle, and greed burns like a hidden ember. We shall stoke these fires and see what rises." As the rain resumed its mournful cadence, Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. The footprints in the mist were but the beginning, and the truth, like the fog itself, remained tantalizingly out of reach, waiting to be unveiled by the detective's unrelenting intellect. Chapter 5. Secrets Unveiled. The conservatory of Willowbrook Hall, a glass-domed sanctuary filled with the lush greenery of exotic plants, offered a stark contrast to the brooding stone walls of the estate. Orchids and ferns thrived in the humid air, their vibrant hues softened by the grey light filtering through the rain-streaked panes. The scent of damp earth and blooming flowers mingled with the faint tang of citrus, creating an atmosphere both serene and oppressive, as if the very plants conspired to guard the secrets of the Harrington family. It was here, on the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation, in October 1927, that the Belgian detective continued his relentless pursuit of the truth behind Edward Harrington's disappearance. But one with the little grey cells hold the advantage. Let us begin with Mademoiselle Thornton. Eliza Thornton entered the conservatory, her raven hair catching the dim light, her porcelain complexion marred by the shadows of sleepless nights. Her deep blue eyes, though striking, held a turmoil that Poirot had noted earlier, a psychology of passion tempered by pain. Her emerald gown, now mended where it had torn, rustled softly as she sat, her hands clutching a lace handkerchief. The scrap of fabric found in Edward's room had pointed to her, yet her alibi, corroborated by Jenkins, suggested a misdirection. Poirot's gaze was gentle but unyielding. "Mademoiselle," he began, "you loved Edward, yet there was discord. Tell me, what secret lies between you?" Eliza's lips trembled, and after a moment's hesitation she spoke, her voice low. "I concealed it before, Monsieur Poirot, but Edward broke our engagement a month ago. He confessed to an
Indiscretion during his last expedition in Africa. A woman. A fleeting affair. I was devastated, but I agreed to maintain appearances for the family's sake. That night, we argued again. He swore he loved only me, but I couldn't trust him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Motive, mademoiselle. Jealousy. Betrayal. Yet you were in the conservatory at midnight, seen by Jenkins. Is this true? Yes, she whispered, tears brimming. I wept alone, surrounded by these plants, until nearly 1. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the revelation. A broken heart, it burns fiercely. But the fabric in Edward's room, it suggests another hand at work. Next, Poirot summoned cousin Victoria Langley, whose severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze lent her an air of unyielding authority. Her psychology, one of calculated ambition, had already revealed cracks under scrutiny, and now in the conservatory's humid embrace, her composure seemed further strained. She carried a leather portfolio, which she placed on the table with deliberate precision. "Miss Langley," Poirot said, "you believe yourself the rightful steward of Willowbrook. Did Edward's plan—"
Victoria's gaze hardened. "I am no criminal, monsieur. I was in my study, as I said, working late." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The mind plans, even in solitude. We shall verify." The inquiry shifted to Uncle Bertram Harrington, whose corpulent frame seemed out of place among the delicate flora. His ruddy cheeks flushed deeper under Poirot's scrutiny, his small eyes darting nervously. His psychology, one of desperation driven by mounting debts, was further illuminated when Poirot produced a discovery from Edward's desk. A bundle of IOUs, signed by Bertram, totaling thousands of pounds. "Monsieur Bertram," Poirot said, holding up the papers, "these suggest Edward held power over you. Blackmail, perhaps?" Bertram mopped his brow, his voice unsteady. "He lent me money, yes, but it was no blackmail. I promised to repay him. I was in my room that night, as I told you." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Yet your debts, they weigh heavily. An heir's disappearance might lighten such a burden, no?" Bertram spluttered, but Poirot waved him away, his mind already turning to the next clue. The butler, Mr. Jenkins, was questioned again, this time in the conservatory's corner, where a lemon tree cast dappled shadows. His gaunt frame and hollow cheeks seemed to blend with the foliage, his psychology a complex tapestry of loyalty and resentment. Poirot probed deeper, sensing a hidden wound. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, "Edward accused you of theft. Did this accusation fester?" Jenkins' eyes flickered, his hands clasping tightly. "It was a lie, sir. He thought I'd taken from the household funds, but I never did. He threatened to sack me, but I served faithfully. I was in the pantry until midnight, then abed." Poirot nodded. "Loyalty, it binds, but resentment, it festers. A dangerous combination." A psychological clue emerged. Jenkins' restrained demeanor masked a simmering anger, a motive rooted in wounded pride. Poirot orchestrated a reconstruction of the evening, gathering the household in the dining room to retrace the timeline. "At 10, the dinner ends in discord," he announced. "At 11, Edward retires, yet the maid, Mary, heard footsteps at 1 in the morning. Who?
These are threads in a tapestry of deceit, but the psychology, it is the needle that will stitch them together." As the afternoon waned, the conservatory's glass walls seemed to close in, the air heavy with the weight of revelations. Poirot paced among the plants, his mind a whirl of deductions. Eliza's broken engagement, it fuels passion, but her alibi holds. Victoria's documents, they suggest a calculated move, yet she was in her study. Bertram's IOUs, they bind him to Edward's fate. Jenkins' resentment, it smolders like a hidden fire. And Thorne, his secrets remain elusive. Hastings frowned. Could it be a conspiracy, Poirot? More than one acting together? Poirot paused, his gaze distant. Possible, but unlikely. The human heart, it acts alone in its darkest moments. The footsteps, at one, they suggest a single actor, moving with purpose. The rain continued its mournful cadence outside. The conservatory, a fragile bubble amidst the storm. Poirot's little gray cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. The secrets unveiled in this verdant sanctuary were but the beginning, and the truth, like the fog that still lingered over Willowbrook, remained tantalizingly out of reach, awaiting the detective's unrelenting intellect to bring it into the light. Chapter 6. The Body Discovered. The air over Willowbrook Hall grew heavier as the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1927 drew toward its grim climax. The persistent drizzle had given way to a brooding mist that enveloped the estate, cloaking its ancient stone walls and sprawling gardens in an ethereal haze. The ornamental lake, nestled at the edge of the manicured lawns and bordered by drooping willows, shimmered faintly under the weak sunlight, its surface a mirror of secrets yet to be unveiled. It was here, amidst the melancholy beauty of the Sussex countryside, that the mystery of Edward Harrington's disappearance took a tragic turn. Hercule Poirot, his tailored overcoat slightly damp from the mist, stood at the lake's edge, his piercing green eyes scanning the water with the intensity of a hawk. Beside him, Poirot's insistence. Under his direction, they dragged the lake with nets and poles, their movements slow and deliberate in the murky water. The mist lent an eerie quiet to the scene, broken only by the splash of oars and the occasional call of a distant crow. After an hour of painstaking effort, a cry went up from one of the men. A net had caught something heavy. The group converged, hauling their find to the shore. There, amidst the reeds and mud, lay the body of Edward Harrington. His once dashing features pallid and lifeless, his explorer's frame clad in the remnants of his dinner attire. Ligature marks encircled his neck, stark against his pale skin, and a heavy stone tied to his waist with a rope suggested a deliberate attempt to conceal the crime. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, kneeling beside the body, his gloved hands hovering over the marks. Not disappearance, but murder most calculated. Strangled with a silk cord, then weighted and submerged to simulate vanishing. The method, it is revealed at last. Hastings' face paled, his voice unsteady. Strangled, Poirot. But who could do such a thing? And why hide the body here? Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. The why, mon ami, is tied to the who. The lake. It was chosen for its seclusion, but the killer underestimated the diligence of Hercule Poirot. The constables secured the scene as Poirot examined the body further. The silk cord, though loosened by the water, bore fibres that matched the livery of Mr. Jenkins, the butler a clue that deepened suspicion. Yet, Jenkins' alibi, corroborated by the maid Mary, placed him in the pantry until midnight, occupied with duties. Poirot noted the discrepancy, his mind whirling with possibilities. The stone, a rough slab from the garden, suggested a hasty but deliberate act. The rope knotted with precision. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the cord. "The fibres, they point to Jenkins, yet his timeline exonerates him. A misdirection, perhaps, or a frame." Hastings frowned, his notebook open. "Murder? It is too cruel. Who could hate Edward so?" Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was unyielding. Hatred, madame? Or perhaps ambition, greed, revenge? The motives, they abound. Uncle Bertram Harrington, his corpulent frame shaking, mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his ruddy cheeks drained of colour. His psychology of desperation, driven by debts, now seemed compounded by fear. "It's
monstrous, he stammered. I argued with Edward, yes, but murder? Never.
Poirot's eyes narrowed. Your debts, monsieur, they bound you to Edward. His death, it frees you, no? Bertram's protestations were drowned by Eliza Thornton's anguished cry. The fiancée, her raven hair dishevelled, clutched her lace handkerchief, her blue eyes brimming with tears. Her passionate psychology, marked by jealousy over Edward's infidelity, now grappled with grief. He was flawed, but I loved him, she whispered. Who could do this? Poirot tilted his head. Love, mademoiselle. It can turn to hate. The fabric in his room, it pointed to you. Yet your alibi holds. A puzzle, no? Cousin Victoria Langley stood rigid, her severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze unmoved by the revelation. Her psychology of calculated ambition suggested she viewed Edward's death as an opportunity to secure her claim to Willowbrook. A tragedy, she said curtly. But Edward's recklessness invited trouble. Poirot's voice was sharp. Trouble, mademoiselle? Or opportunity? Your documents, they contest his inheritance. His death, it serves you well. Victoria's lips pursed, but she offered no reply. Mr. Jenkins, the butler, hovered at the room's edge, his gaunt frame and hollow cheeks betraying no emotion. Yet his eyes flickered with unease. His psychology of suppressed resentment, fueled by Edward's accusation of theft, now faced scrutiny over the cord's fibers. Mr.
Body. It changes all, mon ami. Strangulation requires strength, cunning. The lake, it was a desperate choice to hide the crime, yet it failed. The fibers, the footprints, the cigarette case, they weave a tapestry of misdirection. Hastings looked up from his notes. But who benefits most, Poirot? Lady Harrington secures the estate. Bertram escapes his debts. Victoria claims her inheritance. Eliza avenges her betrayal. Jenkins settles a grudge. Thorne hides his past. Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind his back. All benefit in their twisted psyches. But the timeline, it is key. Dinner ends at 10. Edward retires at 11. Footsteps at 1. The body submerged later, perhaps near dawn. The killer acted alone, I suspect, but with accomplices in deceit. Outside, the mist thickened, cloaking Willowbrook in silence. Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of a murder now laid bare. The discovery of Edward's body had shifted the mystery from disappearance to homicide, and the detective's intellect was a beacon in the fog, ready to illuminate the truth hidden within the shadows of Willowbrook Hall. Chapter 7. Interrogations deepen. The billiard room of Willowbrook Hall, with its dark green baize table and polished oak walls, exuded an air of masculine reserve, its heavy air tinged with the faint scent of cigar smoke and aged wood. The flickering light of a single chandelier cast long shadows, amplifying the tension that had settled over the estate like a pall. It was the evening of the second day of Hercule Poirot's investigation in October 1927, and the discovery of Edward Harrington's body in the ornamental lake had transformed the mystery from a puzzling disappearance into a chilling case of murder. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive frame impeccably clad in a charcoal suit, stood near the billiard table, his piercing green eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. His waxed moustache, a paragon of symmetry, twitched faintly as he prepared to deepen his interrogations. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal confidant, stood nearby, his notebook open, his fair hair slightly dishevelled from the day's grim revelations. His fray. Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, entered the billiard room with a measured step, his scholarly beard and wire-rimmed spectacles lending him an air of detached intellect. Yet his reserved psychology, hinting at concealed depths, was betrayed by the nervous tick of his fingers on his pocket watch. The cigarette case found in the willow grove had cast suspicion on him,
and Poirot's earlier questions about his African connection to Edward had elicited unease. Now, with the murder confirmed, Poirot's scrutiny was unrelenting. "Dr. Thorne," Poirot began, his tone gentle yet piercing, "you claimed to be in the library reading at 11, yet the cigarette case, it was found near the lake. And now, a body, strangled and submerged. Your alibi, it is thin, no?" Thorne's eyes flickered, his voice steady but strained. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, the case was stolen. I was in the library until midnight alone. I had no reason to harm Edward." Poirot tilted his head. "No reason? Yet you knew him in Africa. A man of your intellect, he conceals much. A grudge, perhaps, from a shared past?" Thorne's fingers tightened on the watch. "We had no quarrel. I treated his injuries a fever, nothing more. His death is a tragedy, not my doing." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The tragedy, it is yours if the truth emerges. The little gray cells, they note your anxiety." As Thorne departed, Poirot confided in Hastings. "His alibi crumbles, mon ami. Alone in the library, no witnesses. The cigarette case, it may be a plant, but his secrecy, it is a clue." Next came Cousin Victoria Langley, her severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze exuding calculated ambition. Her psychology, marked by an unyielding belief in her right to Willowbrook, had been strained by Edward's plans to sell the estate. The documents she had presented, contesting his legitimacy, suggested a motive rooted in ambition. She stood rigidly, her thin lips pursed, as Poirot addressed her. "Miss Langley," he said, "Edward's death secures your claim to
Predicament. Poirot held up a plaster cast of the prints, obtained by the constables. "Monsieur Bertram," Poirot said, "these footprints, they lead from Edward's window to the lake. They match your boots." "Explain." Bertram mopped his brow, his voice unsteady. "I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room. Someone must have taken my boots, framed me. I owed Edward money, yes, but I'd never harm him." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Framed, you say? A convenient excuse for a man whose debts demanded a desperate act." Bertram spluttered, but Poirot dismissed him, turning to Hastings. "The footprints, they are too perfect, mon ami. A killer so careless? Or a trap laid for Bertram?" Eliza Thornton followed, her raven hair dishevelled, her blue eyes brimming with grief. Her passionate psychology, marked by jealousy over Edward's infidelity, now grappled with the reality of his murder. The scrap of fabric in his room had pointed to her, yet her alibi held. Poirot probed gently, sensing a deeper truth. "Mademoiselle," he said, "Edward's betrayal wounded you deeply. His death, does it bring peace or pain?" Eliza's voice trembled. "Pain, Monsieur Poirot. I loved him, despite everything. But that night, I found letters in his room. Letters from another woman. I confronted him, then fled to the conservatory, weeping." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Letters? A new clue, mademoiselle. Yet your alibi, it holds. Someone used your gown's fabric to mislead us." The letters, retrieved by Hastings, revealed a correspondence with a woman from Edward's African expedition. Innocent, yet suggestive enough to fuel Eliza's jealousy. A red herring, Poirot noted, but one that deepened the web of motives. Finally, Mr. Jenkins, the butler, entered, his gaunt frame and hollow cheeks blending with the room's shadows. His psychology of suppressed resentment, fueled by Edward's accusation of theft, was now complicated by the silk cord's fibers matching his livery. Poirot held up a sample of the
1. The body was moved later, perhaps near dawn. Who had the opportunity? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Opportunity, mon ami, is created by cunning. The stopped clock Victoria was near the hall. The footprints?
Bertram's boots, yet borrowed. The fibres, Jenkins's livery, yet accessible. The letters, Eliza's jealousy, yet a distraction. And Thorn his alibi, it is the weakest. Outside the mist thickened, cloaking Willowbrook in silence. Poirot stood by the window, gazing into the fog. The murder, it was planned with precision, yet executed with haste. The lake, it was a desperate choice, but the killer underestimated the little grey cells. Hastings frowned. Could it be more than one, Poirot? A conspiracy? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The act, it is solitary, but the deceit, it is shared. The killer will web, but the threads, they will unravel. The billiard room's chandelier flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance with the secrets of Willowbrook Hall. Poirot's intellect, a beacon in the fog, was poised to pierce the veil of lies, drawing ever closer to the truth of Edward Harrington's murder. Chapter 8. The Web of Deceit. The evening descended upon Willowbrook Hall with a tempestuous fury. The Sussex sky rent by thunder and lightning that illuminated the estate's ancient stone facade in stark, fleeting bursts. The drawing-room, its heavy velvet draperies drawn against the storm, was a crucible of tension, the firelight casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled household. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive frame exuding an air of unyielding determination, stood before the grand fireplace, his piercing green eyes scanning the suspects with the precision of a master strategist. His waxed mustache, a paragon of symmetry, twitched faintly as he prepared to unravel the intricate web of deceit surrounding Edward Harrington's murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal confidant, sat nearby, his notebook filled with the day's revelations, his fair hair damp from the storm's relentless assault. It was the second evening of their investigation in October 1920.
Cousin Victoria Langley, whose severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze exuded calculated ambition. Her psychology, marked by an unyielding belief in her right to Willowbrook, had been strained by Edward's plans. Poirot's earlier discovery of her proximity to the Hall suggested opportunity. "Miss Langley," Poirot began, his tone probing. "The clock in the hall, it was stopped deliberately, no? You were in your study nearby. Did you tamper with it to obscure the timeline?" Victoria's lips pursed, her gaze defiant. "I had no reason to touch the clock, Monsieur Poirot. I was reviewing accounts, as I said. Edward's death is a tragedy, but I am no murderer." Poirot tilted his head. "Your ambition, it burns brightly. The clock, it confuses the hour of Edward's demise, a convenience for one with motive." Victoria's hands clenched, but she remained silent, her composure a fragile mask. Next, Poirot turned to Dr. Elias Thorne, whose scholarly beard and wire-rimmed spectacles concealed a psychology of secrecy. The cigarette case found in the Willow Grove and his weak alibi had cast suspicion, but a new revelation deepened the mystery. Poirot had learned from a groundskeeper that Thorne had been seen near the lake the previous week, examining the terrain, a detail he had not disclosed. "Dr. Thorne," Poirot said, holding up the cigarette case, "your presence near the lake, it was not merely a walk, no? You knew Edward from Africa. Did he uncover a secret, perhaps fraudulent credentials, that threatened you?" Thorne's fingers tightened on his pocket watch, his voice strained. "Edward knew nothing of consequence. My credentials are valid. I was in the library that night, as I told you." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet the groundskeeper places you at the lake days prior. Planning, perhaps. The little grey cells, they suspect a hidden grudge." Thorne's composure faltered, his eyes darting to the floor, but he offered no further defense. The butler, Mr. Jenkins, was next, his gaunt frame and hollow cheeks blending with the room's shadows. The silk cord's fibers, matching his livery, had implicated him, yet his alibi held. Poirot probed his psychology of suppressed resentment, fueled by Edward's accusation of theft. "By grief. Madame," he said, holding up the fragment, "this will, It benefits you. Did you seek to secure Willowbrook at Edward's expense? Lady Harrington's steely eyes widened, her voice trembling. That is a forgery, Monsieur Poirot. I loved my son. I would never harm him to save the estate. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A forgery, perhaps, but planted by whom? The web. It tightens. Eliza Thornton, her raven hair disheveled, entered last, her passionate psychology strained by grief and jealousy. The letters revealing Edward's infidelity had fueled suspicion, yet her alibi remained solid. Poirot probed gently, sensing a deeper truth. Mademoiselle, he said, the letters, they wounded you. Did your love for Edward turn to hate? Eliza's eyes brimmed with tears. I was angry, yes, but I could never kill him. I found the letters that night, but I fled to the conservatory, as Jenkins saw. Poirot nodded. Your passion, it is genuine, but the fabric in Edward's room, it was planted to mislead, no? As the interrogations concluded, Poirot paced the drawing room, the storm's thunder punctuating his thoughts. Hastings, he said, the web of deceit, it is intricate. The stopped clock, Victoria's opportunity. Thorne's grudge, hidden in his past. Jenkins's resentment, masked by loyalty. The forged will, pointing to Lady Harrington. The letters, inflaming Eliza's jealousy. All are red herrings, yet all reveal truth. Hastings looked up from his notes. But the timeline, Poirot. Dinner at 10. Edward retires at 11. Footsteps at 1. The body moved later. Who acted when? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The footsteps, they are key. One set of prints, large and masculine, yet borrowed boots suggest deception. The killer acted alone, I suspect, but used the household's secrets to obscure the act. Outside, the storm raged, lightning illuminating the portraits of stern Harrington ancestors. Poirot stood by the fire, his mind a whirl of deductions. The method, strangulation with a silk cord, requires strength and cunning. The lake, a desperate choice to hide,
had besieged Willowbrook Hall throughout the evening of October 1927, intensified. Its howling winds and torrential rain battering the ancient estate as if nature itself sought to expose its secrets. The grand dining room, with its long mahogany table and crystal chandelier, was a stage of mounting tension, the flickering candlelight casting restless shadows across the faces of the assembled household. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive frame exuding an air of unyielding resolve, stood at the head of the table, his piercing green eyes scanning the suspects with the precision of a master chess player. His waxed mustache, immaculate despite the day's exertions, twitched faintly as he prepared to tighten the noose of his investigation into Edward Harrington's murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, his steadfast companion, sat to one side, his notebook brimming with notes, his fair hair damp from the storm, his military bearing strained by the weight of the unfolding drama. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot said, his Belgian accent sharp and deliberate. "The storm, it gathers not only in the heavens but within this household. The clues, footprints, fibers, a cigarette case, a forged will, they converge. The little gray cells, they sense the truth is near." Hastings nodded, his voice low. "The motives are clearer now, Poirot. Greed, revenge, ambition. But the timeline and clues still tangle like a knot." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A knot, oui, but one we shall untie. Let us in their facades." The household, summoned for a formal gathering, sat uneasily, their alliances fraying under the weight of suspicion. Eliza Thornton, her raven hair disheveled, accused Uncle Bertram Harrington of greed, her passionate voice trembling. "You wanted Edward's money to clear your debts, Bertram. Admit it." Bertram, his corpulent frame flushed with indignation, retorted sharply. "And you, Eliza? Your jealousy drove you to rage. Those letters proved Edward's betrayal."
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Mes amis, accusations, they reveal more than they conceal.
Unease. Cousin Victoria Langley, her severe tweeds and bespectacled gaze radiating ambition, sat rigidly, her psychology strained by the revelation of her tampering with the hall clock. Poirot addressed her next. Miss Langley, the stopped clock it was your doing, no? To obscure the hour of Edward's murder, perhaps? Victoria's lips pursed. I deny it, monsieur. I was in my study. Edward's death benefits me, yes, but I am no killer. Poirot tilted his head. Your ambition, it is a fire that consumes. The clock, it points to you. The butler, Mr. Jenkins, hovered at the room's edge, his gaunt frame and hollow cheeks blending with the shadows. The silk cord's fibers, matching his livery, had implicated him, but his alibi held. Poirot probed his resentment, fueled by Edward's accusation of theft. Mr. Jenkins, the fibers, they linger. Your wounded pride, did it drive you to act? Jenkins's voice was steady. I served faithfully, sir. The cord was from the drawing-room. Anyone could have taken it. Poirot nodded. Loyalty it masks, but resentment it betrays. Lady Amelia Harrington, her regal poise faltering, faced scrutiny over the forged will fragment. Her psychology of iron resolve, tempered by grief, suggested a complex motive. Madame, Poirot said, the will, it benefits you. Did you seek to secure Willowbrook? Her steely eyes met his. A forgery, Monsieur Poirot. I loved my son. I would never harm him. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Love, it is a shield, but ambition, it pierces. A critical revelation clarified the misdirection. The scrap of fabric in Edward's room, matching Eliza's gown, was confirmed by the maid Mary to have been planted. The tear in Eliza's dress occurred days earlier, unrelated to the crime. The fabric, Poirot mused to Hastings, it was a deliberate act to ensnare Mademoiselle Thornton. The killer, he is cunning, as accusation suggests access to the house's heart. The storm's lightning illuminated the dining room, casting stark shadows across the portraits of Harrington ancestors. Poirot stood at the table's head, his voice commanding. The murder, it is a solitary act, but the deceit, it is collective. The killer exploits the motives, greed, revenge, ambition to obscure the truth. Hastings leaned closer. We're close, Poirot. But who planted the fabric, the will, the cigarette case? Poirot's gaze was resolute. The one who knows the household's secrets, mon ami. The one who moves unseen, yet sees all. Tomorrow we shall gather them once more, and the little grey cells, they will reveal the murderer. The dining room fell silent, save for the storm's relentless roar. The gathering storm was not only outside, but within, as Poirot's intellect closed in on the truth, poised to unravel the web of deceit that had ensnared Willowbrook Hall. Chapter 10. The Grand Deduction. The grand hall of Willowbrook Hall, its vaulted ceiling adorned with intricate plasterwork, and its crystal chandelier casting a radiant glow, stood as a testament to the Harrington family's storied legacy. On the third evening of Hercule Poirot's investigation, in the tempestuous October of 1927, the hall was a stage for revelation, its polished marble floor reflecting the flickering light like a mirror of truth. The storm outside had abated, leaving a heavy silence that amplified the tension within. Hercule Poirot, his diminutive frame exuding an air of unassailable authority, stood at the center of the gathered household, his piercing green eyes scanning each face with the precision of a master sculptor. His waxed mustache, a paragon of symmetry, twitched faintly as he prepared to unveil the truth behind Edward Harrington's murder. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal confidant, stood to one side,
his notebook brimming with the case's intricacies, his fair hair neat despite the weight of anticipation, his military bearing resolute. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his Belgian accent sharp and commanding. "The little grey cells of Hercule Poirot have unraveled the web of
woven to confuse. But the little grey cells, they see the pattern. Let us reconstruct." He turned to the timeline, his voice steady. The dinner. It ends at 10, marked by discord over Edward's plan to sell the estate. At 11, he retires to his chambers. At 1, the maid hears footsteps. Later, near dawn, the body is moved to the lake, weighted with a stone. The method, strangulation with a silk cord from the drawing-room curtain, requires strength and cunning. Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "But the clues, Poirot, they point everywhere. The footprints to Bertram, the fibers to Jenkins, the cigarette case to Thorne." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, mon ami, a masterpiece of misdirection. The footprints, they match Bertram's boots, yet he claims they were borrowed. The fibers, they come from Jenkins's livery, yet his alibi holds. The cigarette case, it bears Thorne's initials, yet was stolen. The stopped clock, it implicates Victoria. The forged will, it points to Lady Harrington. The letters, they inflame Eliza's jealousy. Each clue a red herring, yet each reveals a truth." He faced Bertram, whose ruddy cheeks flushed deeper. "Monsieur Bertram, your debts bound you to Edward. His death frees you, no? Yet your boots, they were taken aframe, as you claim." Bertram mopped his brow. "I swear I was in my room." Poirot nodded, turning to Jenkins. "Mr. Jenkins, the fibers, they match your livery, yet you were in the pantry. Your resentment, it smoldered, but you did not act." Jenkins's hollow cheeks tightened. "I served faithfully, sir." To Eliza, Poirot said, "Mademoiselle, your jealousy was exploited. The fabric in Edward's room, it was planted to ensnare you." Eliza's blue eyes brimmed with tears. "I loved him, despite his betrayal." To Victoria he said, "Miss Langley, your ambition drove you to tamper with the clock, obscuring the timeline. Yet murder, it was not your hand." Victoria's lips pursed, her gaze defiant. "I sought only to protect Willowbrook." To Lady Harrington, Poirot strangled him with a silk cord, taken from the drawing-room, accessible to all. "You used Bertram's boots, borrowed from his room, to leave false footprints. The cigarette case, you dropped it in haste, not stolen as you claimed. The willow twig in your cuff, it places you at the lake, where you moved the body near dawn, using a wheelbarrow evidenced by tracks in the mud, overlooked by all but Poirot." The room fell silent. The fire's crackle the only sound. Thorne's composure crumbled, his face ashen. "You're wrong," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot continued, relentless. "The fibers you planted from Jenkins's livery to implicate him. The fabric you tore from Eliza's gown, knowing her alibi would hold. The forged will you crafted to point to Lady Harrington. The stopped clock you encouraged Victoria's tampering, knowing her ambition. The letters you left to fuel Eliza's jealousy. Each clue a stroke of your cunning. But the little grey cells, they see through your web." Thorne stood, his hands trembling. "Enough! Yes, I did it. Edward ruined me in Africa. My career, my name. He deserved it. I planned it perfectly, but you devil!" The household gasped. Lady Harrington, her chest, Eliza sobbing, Bertram slumping in relief. Jenkins's eyes widened, and Victoria's lips tightened in silent acknowledgement. Hastings stared, his pen frozen. Poirot inclined his head. "The little grey cells, they do not fail. Justice, it is served." The constables, summoned earlier,
stepped forward to restrain Thorne, who offered no resistance. His scholarly facade shattered. Lady Harrington rose, her voice steady despite her grief. Monsieur Poirot, you have brought us truth, though it pains us. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, the truth, it is a bitter medicine, but necessary. As Thorne was led away, the grand hall's chandelier glowed brighter, as if the estate itself exhaled in relief. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. Mon ami, the human heart, it weaves such intricate